What does a woman do when the factory closes, the apartment is gone, and the only thing left is an 8-year-old cat and 14 years of welding knowledge she learned from her grandmother in a garage on Halsted Avenue? Maya Dowell bought a wrecked school bus for $450 and answered that question herself. Subscribe. This one stays with you. The first thing you noticed about Maya Dowell's hands was that they did not match the rest of her. She was 27, slight-framed, with wide brown eyes and a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall. But her hands were thick-knuckled, mapped with fine white lines, where hot metal had kissed skin and stayed. Her right index finger carried a permanent slight curve from years of controlling a welding gun. They were not the hands of a 27-year-old. They were the hands of someone who had been building things for a very long time, because she had been, and because the women before her had been too. Her grandmother, Ruth Dowell, had been one of the first female welders hired at Consolidated Auto Parts in Rockford, Illinois. The Rockford Register-Star had sent a photographer in 1971. The photograph ran on page 7. Ruth in her welding jacket, face shield pushed up, looking at the camera with an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite a challenge, but managed to be both. Maya grew up with that photograph on the wall of Ruth's garage on Halsted Avenue, where Ruth kept her workbench and the Lincoln 140 HD welder she had bought secondhand in 1983 and maintained like it was alive. Ruth started teaching Maya in that garage at 13, not with a curriculum, the way you teach a child to read, repeating the same thing until it stops being a lesson and becomes a language. By 15, Maya could read plate steel for stress points with her thumb the way Ruth did, eyes half closed, feeling for where the metal wanted to fail. Ruth died of a stroke in Maya's sophomore year of high school, in that garage, in her metal chair, coffee still on the floor beside her. Maya didn't go back for 6 months. When she finally did, she sat in Ruth's chair and put both hands flat on the workbench until it got dark. Her mother, Carol, followed Ruth into Consolidated in 2004 as an HVAC technician. She raised Maya alone after Maya's father left, and raised her with the understanding that knowing how to fix a thing was the only insurance that never lapsed. Maya dropped out of Rock Valley College at 19 when the aid package came up short by $3,200 and walked into Consolidated's HR office with her welding certification and Ruth's Lincoln in a borrowed truck. They hired her the same week. 7 years on the fabrication floor, cross-trained into HVAC maintenance, learning the ventilation systems from Carol the same way she had learned welding from Ruth, not from a manual, but from standing close to someone who already knew. On a Friday night in March of 2022 at 11:17 p.m., Maya's phone buzzed. An email from Consolidated Human Resources. Subject line: Important update regarding your employment status. PDF attached. 3 pages. The words private equity restructuring and effective immediately and severance package. 641 workers received the same email at the same time. No meeting, no handshake, no supervisor pulling anyone aside. A PDF on a Friday night, delivered while most of the workforce was already asleep. What Maya did not know until Monday was that Carol had received the same email. 54 years old, 18 years at Consolidated, 6 years from pension eligibility. Gone. The pension fund, after the bankruptcy court finished, paid 28 cents on the dollar. Carol received $11,000. Maya spent her own $9,000 severance, keeping Carol's rent paid for 8 months while her mother looked for work. When the $9,000 was gone, Carol had found a part-time job in Peoria at her sister's. 1 bedroom, no pets clause, no room for Maya, no room for Cleo, the large, unhurried orange tabby cat Maya had found behind the Consolidated loading dock when she was 19, who had slept on her chest through every hard night since. For the next 19 months, Maya and Cleo moved through the spaces a city leaves for people who have fallen out of its official accounting. A storage unit, a condemned construction trailer, a concrete drainage channel under the Mulberry Street Bridge, where Maya rigged a tarp with bungee cords and kept Cleo warm with her own body heat and a battery-powered heating pad she recharged at the public library. Every morning at 5:30, she walked 4 miles to the Day Labor Corner on Auburn Street. She kept her money in a red plaid Christmas cookie tin buried under a piece of rebar in the back of the channel. She didn't know what she was saving toward. She just knew that saving was the only form of control she had left, and that $500 felt, for no precise reason, like the distance between a situation and a life. She found the listing on a Tuesday afternoon in October of 2023 on one of the public computers at the Rockford Public Library. 2001 International School Bus, $450 OBO. Behind Grace Baptist Church, Meridian Ave. Been there a while. Needs work. Call Dennis. Posted 11 weeks earlier. A yellow bus with flat rear tires, a tree branch on the roof, sitting on cracked asphalt behind a brick building with boarded windows. Maya looked at it for a long time. 500 had been a number she made up. 450 was a number that existed. She opened the cookie tin in her mind and counted. $420. She was 30 short. 3 weeks until winter came hard off Lake Michigan and made the bridge genuinely dangerous. That same week, she had spent her last $35 on antibiotics from a sliding scale veterinary clinic on Charles Street because Cleo had a respiratory infection, and she had looked at him wheezing in his carrier one morning and made the decision without deliberating. He had been with her since she was 19. He had slept on her chest through every bad night she could name. The $35 was not a question. It meant she was short. It did not change the direction. She found the 30 in 19 days. 2 days of day labor, one afternoon helping a woman on Longwood Street move furniture, $4 in change from the zipper pocket of her jacket. She called Dennis Okafor on a Wednesday morning from the phone at the library's front desk, a courtesy the staff had extended without being asked more than once, standing with her back to the room, her voice level. He said the bus was still available. She said she'd be there Friday with cash. She walked to Meridian Avenue on Friday morning. 41 degrees, sky the color of old aluminum. Cleo, in the soft-sided carrier on her back, chin on the mesh window, watching the street with his characteristic composure. The cookie tin was in her canvas bag, and she felt its weight against her hip with every step. Not heavy, exactly, but present. The kind of weight that means something. Grace Baptist had been closed 2 years. The brick building was solid but quiet, windows boarded, a for sale sign weathering in the overgrown front lawn. Behind it, the bus sat exactly as photographed. Yellow gone the color of old mustard, streaked rust at every seam, rear tires flat, a long crack across the lower windshield. Dennis Okafor was 60, careful-eyed, heavy canvas coat. A deacon at Grace Baptist for 30 years, the man the board called when something on the property needed a decision. He was standing by the side door when Maya came around the building. She set Cleo's carrier on the asphalt and unzipped the top so he could look around, which he immediately did, with great seriousness. Then she took out the cookie tin. She counted the bills onto the hood. 1s, 5s, 2 10s. She counted twice. Dennis watched her hands. At some point during the second count, his eyes moved to her jacket. The Consolidated Auto Parts logo on the left breast, faded but legible, stitching frayed at one edge. He looked at it, then looked back at the bills. When she finished, she told him she had 420, that she was 30 short, and that she would make it up if he needed it. Dennis looked at the money. He looked at Cleo, who was watching him from the carrier with round yellow eyes. He looked at the Consolidated logo one more time. Then he picked up the $420, folded them into his coat pocket, and handed her a key on a plain ring. He said the bus was hers and the lot was free for now. Then he walked back toward the building without turning around. Maya stood alone in the parking lot with a key in her hand and Cleo stepping one cautious paw onto the asphalt, testing the temperature. The bus was worse inside than outside. Standing water smell, collapsed cardboard over the missing windows. A section of floor near the rear wheel well, where the rust had thinned to near transparency. Light showing through in a pale orange line. She stood in the middle of it without calculating. She was reading, the way Ruth had taught her. Not the surface, but the structure beneath, the places where the material had given, and the places where it was still sound. She took Ruth's notebook from her bag. Composition book. Black cover worn smooth where Ruth's hand had rested. 60 pages of notes and 40 blank. She turned to the first blank page and wrote 2 words. Start here. Then, floor first, before she stood up. The page had 23 items on it in the tight vertical block letters she had absorbed from her grandmother without knowing she was absorbing them. Then she found the drawer under the dashboard, stuck, opened with a flathead, and inside it a folded piece of notebook paper. A repair list, handwritten, dated June 2021. 22 items, organized by area, material estimates in the margins. Exactly the list Maya would have written for exactly this bus. The last item was crossed out 3 times, hard. She could not read it. She folded the paper and put it in Ruth's notebook. Someone had started this before her and stopped. She was going to finish it. All of it, including whatever had been crossed out at the bottom. The first month was demolition. She pulled the bolt stubs from the floor with a cold chisel and hammer, each one dropping into a metal bucket with a sound like a wrong note struck on a bell. She swept out 4 winters of debris, dead leaves, starling feathers, a single red child's mitten stiff as wood, into garbage bags she carried to the dumpster behind the gas station on the next block. She scraped rust off the floor with a wire brush until her shoulders carried the familiar ache of work moving in a direction. She had Ruth's Lincoln 140 HD stored in a hard plastic case at Daryl's workshop on 7th Avenue, a small engine repair shop whose owner had known Ruth and had held the welder without charge or question through all 19 months of Maya's displacement. She retrieved it on the second day of ownership, walking the 4 miles each way, carrying it back along with a half set of cutting torches a foreman at Consolidated had given her on her last day, and a canvas tool roll containing the specific tools Ruth had handed her on her 16th birthday. Cleo supervised from the driver's seat. The welding changed the work's character. Demolition was labor, honest, sequential, 1 bucket at a time. Welding required the particular quality of attention that Maya had been trained into since she was 13, complete and absolute focus that collapsed the world to the 15 seconds between striking the arc and lifting the rod. When she was welding, she was not thinking about Consolidated or Carol or the bridge or what came next. She was only inside the arc, the puddle, the angle of the electrode, the controlled heat of melting metal that her grandmother had given her as a first language. She welded 12 patch plates into the floor over 3 days, working front to rear, each plate fitted and positioned before the arc touched it. She used the cutting torch to remove the rotted framing around the 2 missing windows and welded in new steel cut from a salvaged transit bus door she had traded a half day of labor for at a truck garage on Charles Street. She sealed every chassis seam with marine-grade epoxy traded for at a boat repair shop in Waukegan. In the second week of welding, a spark caught her on the left wrist. Small burn, barely a 1/4 inch. She had pulled her glove back to adjust her grip and taken a stray fragment before she could recover. She looked at it. It had landed exactly on the edge of the scar from a metal shear accident at Consolidated when she was 22. A thin white ridge, slightly raised, running diagonally across the inside of her wrist. The new burn was a perfect red point at the scar's end, as if it had been aimed. She looked at both of them together, the old line and the new point, for longer than the pain warranted. Cleo came and pressed his head against her knee, with the specific pressure he used when he had decided she needed steadying. She put her glove back on and struck the arc again. She found the name on the second Friday, cleaning the inside of the rear frame rail. Her wire brush caught something that wasn't rust. A small stamped metal badge worked loose from the inner surface of the steel. J. Warwick, Rockford Metalworks, 1987. She held it under the work light. Joseph Warwick had come up through Rockford Metalworks in the 80s before the plant closed, then crossed to Consolidated when the trade work followed the consolidation of the region's manufacturing sector. By the early 2000s, he was lead instructor in Consolidated's apprenticeship program, the man who had trained the generation of welders ahead of Maya's. She had used his jigs on the fabrication floor for 7 years without meeting him. He had died in 2021, a year before the closure. She set the badge on the floor. Then she got the welder and a short piece of flat stock and fabricated a small bracket and welded the badge into the front wall at eye level on the interior surface, the first thing she would see every morning when she came in. It was not a ceremony. It was an acknowledgement that she was not the first person to do this kind of work in this kind of place, and that the ones who came before deserved to be in the structure, not just in the memory. When she finished the floor and stepped onto it in her socks, with Cleo watching from the driver's seat, she got down and put her palm flat on the welded steel and pressed. It did not flex, it held. She sat there with her hand on the floor for 20 minutes without moving. By month 3, the bus was structurally sound, the way a well-built thing is sound. Not just repaired, but improved, each patch stronger than what it replaced. She had lined every interior surface. Acoustic deadening stripped from a salvaged moving truck. 2-inch closed cell foam, traded for at a building surplus in Loves Park. Reclaimed cedar paneling, pulled from a barn demolition outside Belvedere. The cedar smelled on warm afternoons like Ruth's garage, sawdust and machine oil, and something underneath that meant safety. Cleo spent most of the month along the south-facing cedar wall, extracting warmth with methodical efficiency. He had stopped shivering in his sleep. Maya noticed the absence of it the first time she woke at 2 in the morning and realized she had not woken up to check on him. Water was the engineering problem she had been thinking about since week 1. 4 trips a week to the gas station carrying 2-gallon jugs was not a life. The dependency was the problem. Every cup of water tied to a trip that cold or injury or exhaustion could interrupt. She needed a system that depended only on physics. She built a rainwater catchment using 200-gallon food-grade plastic totes from the trash pile behind a beverage distributor on Kishwaukee Street. She cleaned them with bleach, sealed every fitting with marine epoxy, and welded custom gutters along the full length of the roof. A 4-hour weld on a cold afternoon, with her breath fogging the face shield. She connected everything with PVC traded for at a plumbing supply on Belmont Avenue. Filtration was 3-stage: sand, activated charcoal, ultraviolet sterilization, using a salvaged aquarium UV unit whose ballast she rewired for 12-volt DC. The whole system held 200 gallons and replenished itself from Rockford's 43 average annual inches of rainfall. For hot water, a propane on-demand heater from an estate sale on North Church Street, $50, plumbed in 1 afternoon. Power came next. 3 damaged but functional 150-watt solar panels from a salvage broker in Sharon. A used inverter rated at 2,400 watts from an electrician upgrading a job site. She had wired electrical systems at Consolidated for 7 years. The bus wiring in 8 days. Every junction clean and labeled, every connection rated above its load. When she threw the breaker the first time and the interior lights came on, warm, yellow-white, steady. Cleo looked up, regarded the light briefly, and went back to sleep. Maya sat down on the cedar floor next to him and did not move for 20 minutes. The heating system was where 7 years as an HVAC technician changed the scale of what was possible. She did not simply install a space heater. She designed a passive solar thermal collection circuit, using the south-facing roof as a collector, running glycol through salvaged copper tubing through a small heat exchanger she fabricated from copper fittings and plate steel, feeding a radiant circuit under the cedar floor. The propane backup kicked in only below 15 degrees outside. Between the passive solar gain, the radiant floor, and the 3-inch insulation envelope, the bus held 64 degrees on days when the parking lot was in the 20s. A fraction of the propane a conventional heater would have burned. Maya had designed HVAC systems for 30,000 square foot manufacturing floors. Designing one for a 40 by 8 foot bus was the same problem at a different scale. In the 6th month, things started appearing on the concrete step at the bottom of the bus door. First, a bag of cat food, the specific brand with the blue label that Maya bought for Cleo. She assumed it was Dennis. The second time, it was a box of E6033 welding electrodes, the specific rod she preferred for sheet metal. That was not a guess. That was knowledge. The third time, it was insulated work gloves in her exact size. She began tracking the timing. Mondays and Thursdays, always before 7 in the morning, she watched for the vehicle. A gray Subaru wagon slowed on Meridian Avenue on a Monday morning in December without stopping. She filed it away. In month 7, on a Thursday morning, the item on the step was a white envelope with her name written on the outside. One word, Maya. She recognized the handwriting before she finished reading it. The way you recognize a voice on the phone before the person identifies themselves. Sandra Pruitt, had been a welding and fabrication instructor at Rockford Career Technical Academy for 22 years before retiring in 2021. Maya had sat in her Saturday enrichment class at 17, and Sandra had told her at the end of the semester that she had the best natural intuition for weld sequencing of any student Sandra had taught in a decade. You do not forget the specific things adult people tell you about yourself when you are 17 and still forming a picture of what you are capable of. Inside the envelope was Maya's AWS certified welder card, renewed fees paid, valid for 3 more years. Maya's certification had lapsed in the second year of homelessness. She had watched the date pass with the particular helplessness of someone who cannot afford $60 for the renewal and cannot spend the energy on anything that is not warmth or food. The card in the envelope was current. Sandra had found it, paid the fee, renewed it, and left it on the step without a note, without a card, without creating any occasion that would require Maya to feel grateful in a way that cost something. Maya stood in the cold doorway with the card in her hand and looked down the empty street. She understood with complete certainty that the gray Subaru was Sandra's and that Sandra had been driving past twice a week for months. She recognized the principle immediately. She had been raised around it. In garages and union halls and shop floors, where the rule was that you helped by closing the gap, not by making the gap visible. Maya never said anything to Sandra. Sandra never said anything to her. She knew it was Sandra's handwriting because of the letter grades. On the practical assessment sheets, Sandra had returned to Maya's class at 17. The grades were written in the top right corner in exactly this hand. Letters slightly forward-leaning, the capital M with a specific double peak. By month 8, the bus had a kitchen, a butcher block countertop pulled from a closing restaurant on State Street. The owner let Maya take it for the cost of hauling, which she did on a borrowed hand truck over a Saturday morning. A 2-burner propane stove from an estate sale on North Main, $30. A farmhouse-style sink from the Habitat Restore on 11th Street, $15, plumbed into the rainwater system in one afternoon. Cast iron pans at $2 each from estate sales around the north side. A short shelf above the stove for the things that needed to stay close, olive oil, salt. Ruth's cast iron pepper mill that Maya had carried in her canvas bag through every place she had slept for 19 months. Above the shelf, Ruth's photograph, not the original, that was somewhere in a box in Peoria, but a print made at the library from a scan done years before. Ruth in her welding jacket, face shield up, looking straight at the camera, looking, from that angle, straight at Maya. She built the bedroom at the end of month 9. A platform bed, framed from Tie-Fi 10 pine salvaged from a deck demolition on Longwood Street. A full-size memory foam mattress from the Salvation Army store, $45, vacuum sealed, expanding back to shape once she cut the plastic. She separated the bedroom from the living space with a sliding barnwood door, wide gray boards on a steel track she fabricated in one Saturday afternoon. On the outside face of the door, she carved with a small chisel the image her grandmother had used to teach her the basic fillet weld at 13, 2 plates, meeting at 90 degrees, the weld bead in the corner, the direction of travel arrows, the tiny margin notation reading, maintain 70-degree travel angle. It was, in the language she had been given, a kind of family crest. No one who saw it would understand what it was. Maya knew what it was. That was sufficient. Cleo's corner was at the rear of the bedroom, in the warmest spot where the radiant floor circuit concentrated its heat. A low cedar platform, 12 inches off the ground, with a firm cushion in navy canvas. Maya built a gentle ramp from the floor to the platform because Cleo was 9 and his mornings had started showing a careful deliberateness when he moved from lying to standing. She had noticed this months earlier. She had built accordingly, without ceremony, as a matter of design. One Sunday evening, while finishing the bedroom window trim, she found the newspaper folded inside the wall cavity. A single broadsheet section from the Rockford Register-Star, April 14, 2003, Metro section. A group photograph, page 9, 6 women at a shop bench, welding jackets, face shields up. Caption: Students in Rockford Career Technical Academy's Women in Trades program. In the back row, second from the right, arms crossed, looking at the camera with that expression, not quite a smile, Not quite a challenge, was Ruth Dowell, 50 years old, nearly a decade younger than Maya had ever known her. Standing in a welding classroom in the same city where Maya was now building a home with the skills Ruth had given her. Maya unpinned the cavity and pinned the page to the bedroom wall above the bed. Ruth at 18 from the garage photograph. Ruth at 50 from the newspaper. The same woman. Both photographs looking forward. Maya stood back and looked at them both for a long time. Then she went back to the window trim. In the 14th month, Maya built the drawer. It was the last thing she built and the thing she told no one about. Not Dennis Okafor. Not Sandra Pruitt. Not Carol. Not anyone. Under the floor of the bus, on the passenger side between the axle housings, there was a manufacturer's maintenance access channel. 5 feet long, 20 inches wide, 16 inches deep, designed for electrical and hydraulic routing. From outside the bus, a stamped steel cover with 2 wing nuts. From inside, hidden entirely behind the cedar floor paneling. Maya had known it was there since month 2. She had left it alone until now. She worked on it for 3 evenings, fitted the channel with a plywood floor and closed-cell foam on every surface, ran a 12-volt lead to a small reading lamp at the far end, fabricated a new access cover from half-inch plate steel on hinges, with a magnetic catch that released only when you pressed a specific recess point she had designed to look identical to the surrounding weld spot pattern. From outside the bus, the cover looked like a standard maintenance panel. From inside, it was invisible. You had to already know where to press. She kept 5 things in the drawer. Ruth's technical notebook, the composition book she had been filling since October, still with blank pages remaining. The cookie tin, the red plaid Christmas tin she had carried $420 into the Grace Baptist parking lot. Now empty, kept because it was the container that had held the beginning of this. The 16 letters she had written to Carol over 16 months, 1 per month, describing the work, describing Cleo, describing the things she had figured out, and the things she was still afraid of. Written in the evenings, never mailed, because Carol would have worried, and there was nothing Carol could do with worry except carry it, and she was already carrying enough. Sandra's envelope, kept because the handwriting on the outside was the handwriting of someone who had said the right thing at the right time, a decade before it was needed. And the photograph of Cleo from 2015, the day Maya found him behind the consolidated loading dock, a small orange kitten, young enough to fit in one hand, sitting on the concrete with complete composure, as if he had been waiting specifically for her and was mildly unsurprised she had finally arrived. The first evening after she finished the drawer, she opened Ruth's notebook to the last page with writing on it. Load calculations, 1998 or so, a project she had never been able to identify. In the lower corner, below the figures, added later in the same tight block letters, a woman who knows how to weld is never truly homeless. She just hasn't found a place to put her torch down yet. Maya did not know if Ruth had written that for herself, or for someone else, or for no one. She did not know if Ruth had known. It did not matter. The sentence had arrived at the moment when she was finally standing in the place where it made sense. She sat on the cedar floor, with the notebook in her lap, and the lamp very small in the quiet drawer, and Cleo lay down 18 inches away, close enough to be present, not so close as to intrude, which was something he had always understood instinctively. And Maya stayed there until the lamp started to feel warm. On a Monday morning in the 15th month, Maya dressed in a clean shirt, laced up the insulated boots Sandra had left on the step in December, and drove the bus to a copy shop on East State Street to print 3 documents: her resume, her AWS certification, and her HVAC technician license, still current. She walked into Rockford Fabrication and Steel on 11th Street at 8:45 and asked at the front desk for whoever was doing hiring. Troy Hess was 45, medium build, a scar along his left jawline from something industrial, the posture of a man who had spent years on a shop floor and carried it permanently. He looked at her certification documents for 40 seconds. Then he said, "Follow me." His office was small and had a whiteboard with a weld schedule on it and a half-eaten bag of pretzels on the filing cabinet. The interview was 40 minutes. He asked her to walk through her welding experience, her HVAC background, her troubleshooting sequence for a pressure loss in a forced air system, and her approach to a specific weld problem he sketched on a notepad. She answered each question in the direct, specific way of a person who has actually done the work, without padding, without performance, with the occasional pause of someone thinking rather than reciting. At the end, Troy slid the employment application across the desk. Under address, Maya wrote, Grace Baptist Church parking lot, Meridian Avenue, Rockford, IL. She wrote it without hesitation. Troy looked at the address. He looked at Maya. Then he said, Is that the yellow bus on Meridian? Maya said yes. He nodded once, as though this confirmed something that had been a question, and continued through the application. He did not lower his voice. He did not change his expression. He did not create any moment that required Maya to explain or justify. The application was a document about qualifications. The address was an address. She was offered the job by phone the following Wednesday, sitting at a library computer with Cleo in the carrier under the table. Starting wage, $4 below what Consolidated had paid, which she had expected. Health insurance included, which she had not had in 3 years. She accepted immediately. Second week on the job, a man named Kevin asked her in the break room where she lived. Maya told him. Kevin repeated it to 2 other men that afternoon in a way designed to produce a reaction. She did not hear him directly, but she saw the specific expression on 3 faces the following morning. The look of people who have been given a piece of information and are deciding what to do with it. That afternoon, Troy called Kevin into his office. Door closed 11 minutes. When Kevin came out, he did not look at Maya the way he had been looking at her, and he never mentioned her address again. 3 months later, Troy told her, unprompted, I hired you because your skills test scored higher than every other candidate in that pool. The address was not a factor. What a person's address is has nothing to do with what they know. I told Kevin the same thing. He said it the way people say things that they believe are obvious and are tired of still having to say. 2 weeks into the job, Maya's phone rang on her lunch break. A number she didn't recognize. She answered. The voice said her name the way people who have known you your whole life say it, not as a greeting, but as a verification. Her sister Bridget. 31, Chicago insurance, silent for 2 years and 4 months. She had heard from Carol that Maya had a job. Maya stood in the parking lot, looking west toward Meridian Avenue, and breathed. She was not angry. She had expected anger when this call came, but what she felt instead was the relief of a weight being set down. She said, I'm still here, Bridget. Then she said, hold on. Then she did not hang up. They talked for 43 minutes. Sandra Pruitt called in the 17th month, the first time they had spoken directly since Maya's Saturday class at 17. Sandra's voice was the same. Unhurried, dry, precise, the voice of someone who had explained things carefully to many people over many years and had developed a permanent intolerance for imprecision. She said she had been talking to the administration at Rockford Career Technical Academy, a new spring elective, applied trade skills, small-scale construction, students learning to apply welding, electrical and HVAC skills to the fabrication of livable small structures from retired vehicles. 2 afternoons a week. They needed someone to lead the hands-on component. She asked if Maya was interested. Maya said yes before Sandra finished the question. The first class was 12 students in a shop room that smelled of machine oil and soldering flux and the sweetness of fresh-cut steel. A smell so completely associated with Ruth's garage that walking into it produced a physical response Maya did not entirely control, a specific steadiness, a sense of the floor being exactly as solid as floors are supposed to be. She introduced herself, wrote her certifications on the board, and told them in plain language what they were going to learn and why it translated across more applications than they could currently imagine. She said that the ability to permanently join metal was one of the oldest durable human skills, and that a person who had it was, in a specific practical sense, never without recourse. A girl in the second row named Jasmine, 17 quick, with the attentiveness that looks like distraction until you realize she has retained everything, raised her hand and asked if Maya was the one who lived in the bus on Meridian Avenue. Maya said yes. Jasmine asked if she had been embarrassed. The room was quiet. Not the silence of discomfort, but the silence of a group that understood something was being considered. Maya said, I was embarrassed that I let my certification lapse. I was embarrassed that I waited too long to ask for the right kind of help. The bus did not embarrass me. The bus is the most useful thing I have ever built. She paused. What embarrasses a person and what should embarrass a person are often not the same list. Learning the difference is worth more than most things I can teach you. Jasmine wrote something in her notebook. Maya continued the class. In the third week, she noticed Marcus Webb. 16. Quiet in the particular way that is different from shy. The specific quiet of a person using attention as a resource, reading a room before committing to being seen in it. His shoes were clean in a way that required deliberate effort given the weather. His shirt was pressed. When he entered an unfamiliar room, his eyes checked the exits before he sat down. Maya recognized every sign with the accuracy of direct experience. She had been that person. She had pressed shirts on a travel iron in a car. She had checked exits. She did not pull Marcus aside. After the Thursday session, when the others had left, she folded a piece of notebook paper into quarters and set it on top of his backpack as she passed, without looking at him, continuing to close up the shop. On the paper, a welding apprenticeship program with a monthly stipend, a community college scholarship for HVAC certification, 2 housing stability organizations that required no documentation or proof of address, and 3 libraries in Rockford, where bathrooms were clean and outlets were accessible, and staff did not ask why you were there. At the bottom, in Ruth's block letters, your skills belong to you. No one gets to take them. 3 weeks later, Marcus asked her after class whether the apprenticeship had an age minimum. She said she thought 18, but would confirm. He said he had 2 years. She said, 2 years is time. He nodded and left. She turned off the shop lights. It was enough. Carol Dowell drove up from Peoria on a Saturday in April of the 18th month, in the same green Honda Civic she had driven since 2008, with 2 grocery bags in the back seat and a road atlas on the passenger seat, despite having GPS, which Maya found entirely characteristic. She parked on Meridian and stood on the sidewalk, looking at the bus, still rust yellow, still wearing its deliberate look of abandonment, weeds around the front tires, dust on the hood. Nothing about its exterior suggesting anything except long dormancy. Then she walked around to the side door, which Maya already had open, and stepped up onto the cedar floor and was quiet. She was quiet for a long time. She looked at the butcher block kitchen, the cast iron pans, Ruth's photograph above the stove. She looked at the pepper mill on the shelf, which she recognized immediately, and said nothing about. She looked at the reading lamp with the yellow shade, the quality of afternoon light through the south-facing windows, the warmth of a space that had been thought about carefully. She looked at Cleo on his navy cushion in a parallelogram of spring sunlight, apparently levitating with contentment. She looked at the newspaper page above the bedroom door. Ruth at 50, arms crossed, the expression that was not quite a smile and not quite a challenge. She stood in front of it for a long time. Then she set her grocery bags on the butcher block and asked if she could sit down. Maya made coffee, and they sat across the small table and talked for 3 hours about ordinary things. Carol's job, Maya's job, the students at the academy, a recipe Carol had been working on, a book they had both read at different times. Cleo came and sat on the table between them, which was allowed on the bus, and Carol stroked him and drank coffee and said nothing about the bus or the lot or the neighborhood or any of the contextual things that could have been said and would have changed the quality of the afternoon entirely. She was being careful with this, in the way it deserved, understanding that what her daughter had built in this parking lot was not a temporary measure or a proof of desperation, but a considered and skilled thing, built from 14 years of learning from women who made something from what was available, and that the correct response was attention and not commentary. Before she left, Carol opened her purse and took out a ring, heavy gold, wide band, a union seal on the face, the kind forged for Rockford's manufacturing workers in the post-war decades as a mark of membership and permanence. Ruth Dowell's union ring. Carol had kept it in the small dish on her dresser since Ruth died, and Maya had not known. Carol put it in Maya's hand and closed Maya's fingers around it and held her hand for a moment, both of them in the bus doorway in the spring light. Then Carol walked to the parking lot and drove south on Meridian toward the interstate. Maya watched the car until it turned. Then she went inside, opened the drawer, placed Ruth's ring in the cookie tin next to the letters and the certification card, and Cleo's kitten photograph, and closed everything. 3 weeks later, Dennis Okafor called. The church board was considering an offer on the property. He wanted Maya to know before they decided. He wanted her opinion. Maya sat on the concrete step outside the bus door. Behind her on the lot, 3 vehicles were in various stages of transformation. A cargo van, a retired transit bus, a converted horse trailer, each belonging to a student from the academy, each somewhere in its own process of becoming a place where a person could live with skill and intention and a reasonable degree of warmth. Sandra had arranged use of the lot through the board, quietly, the way the important arrangements in this part of the world were made. Not through applications, but through one person telling another that a thing seemed right. Maya looked at the 3 vehicles, and at the lot, and at the Meridian Avenue sky, going orange at the western edge, and did not answer Dennis yet. She took Ruth's notebook from her jacket and opened to a new page and wrote 2 words at the top. Start here. Below that, the first line of a list she could not yet see the end of. She would call Dennis back in an hour. She had some thinking to do first. The beginning was what you needed. The beginning, and somewhere to put your tools down. More than 770,000 Americans were experiencing homelessness in January of 2024. The largest count ever recorded. Thousands of retired commercial vehicles sit on lots across every Rust Belt city in this country, priced under $1,000. Most crushed before anyone who needs them ever sees the listing. What Maya Dowell built on Meridian Avenue was not a workaround. It was the application of real skill to a real problem by a person trained across 3 generations to look at a material and ask what it still had left to give.
Maya were not everything the way most people do, not one dramatic moment, but a slow erosion. A job on your Friday night email. An apartment grown when the money ran out. A city that kept moving while she lost to sleep beside a railway channel, keeping a 13-year-old cat warm with her body. What she did know was the thing no email could reach. Her grandmother stood in a Rockford factory in 1971, one of the first women ever hired to work there. She passed the loan to Maya in a restaurant, a hotel, a venue. Not so manual or classroom, but so prison. Not standing close to someone who already knew the repetition until skill stopped being a lesson and become a language. The language step Maya line. The real lesson is about welding. It's about what happened when you invest deeply in a skill, in a craft, in when you realize that investment cannot be restructured away, cannot be mailed out or accepted on a Friday night, cannot be taken by practically car or private equity. What you truly know belongs to you. Maya found a broken bus for $420 and built a home. Then she walks into a job interview and writes her address a parking lot with a hesitation because she knew what she was worth. That's the inheritance. What living, no, not money, not property, the attackable knowledge of how to make something from what remains. What skill are you missing for what